Well, hello, the viewing several. It's good to have you on for this 25th edition of the Echo Chamberlain livestream. And without any further ado, which is to say without any ado really at all, let's get on to the guests. My first guest was inadvertently included in a White House Signal group chat discussing a US attack on Houthi rebels in Yemen. On the same afternoon, he was unintentionally included in a WhatsApp chain with the British cabinet discussing domestic security and backdoor access to Apple. And after making plans to conduct a Zoom call with his local doctor to discuss a recurring back strain, he has inadvertently found himself clicking on the wrong link and included in this live stream. He is Mr. Greg Owen.
You know, the problem is I have been tricked into going to whitehouse.com, and I am in multiple group chats that are discussing backdoor access. So you got a lot of that correct, even though you didn't know it. Did I almost get a spit take?
Almost. You were close. You're right on the break. Oh, that's a quality gag. That's good. How are you, my friend?
I'm fantastic. How about yourself?
Hanging in there. It's if there was like a time where you could preserve like the perfect day weather-wise, right now it's like March. It's cooling off, but there's still everything is richly contoured with the light. It's very beautiful. The cicadas have gone. There's a freshness and a fervency to everything, and the leaves they have like a gloss and a glimmer and sparkle to them. So this is the day that I could distill if I could choose any.
It sounds like a perfect spring day.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Anyway, I guess we better get on to our second guest. I've been waiting 2 weeks to give this introduction. Introducing my second guest. You may know him from the internet. He is Despot of Antrim.
You know, I wanted to just to let our viewers know that they're heard. We do listen to them and we read the comments. So I thought I'd start just by reading a couple of the comments from the last stream to encourage comments. So I'm just going to go through a couple of them here. From The Hooded Man, very entertaining stream, Echo and panel, heart. Kristen was fantastic. I hope she will be on more often. Yeah, awesome. And here we have another one. Mostly agree with Despot regarding his worst on rewatch picks, especially Saving Private Ryan. That one is from B. Shalene 4394. So thanks very much. And we got, I'll just read one more. Oh no, this guy, Andrew Brennan, says the best thing on YouTube currently, and it shows that very different individuals can create informative, amusing, and great content. See, you don't all need to be politically based like the Despot. You can be, a lost libertarian soul or a hopelessly left-wing iconoclast, and we can still have a good conversation. And one more, just going to have one more here from Daniel Smedjard Bus. I have to unsubscribe. The use of AI to make up things that you couldn't be bothered to research, so made shit up is okay for your book. Fuck you. AI has no distinction between reality and fiction, and if you don't know that, you're retarded and couldn't write a book in the first place. Fuck off. Unsub. So, yeah, guys, thanks very much for all the comments. Very much appreciate it.
And that was exactly the tone in his mind in which he was typing. Yeah. Damn, well, I feel like this empty chasm in me that I've lost that subscriber. Damn. Well, that chasm is about to be filled as I introduce today's featured guest. Today's featured guest, released a Snow White video a few days ago that had me absolutely, absorbedly rewatching a particular section on a loop and left me rocked back in my heels at the audacity and astonishing wider implications. It wasn't the clinching insights, nor the generation straddling relatable coolness of tone, nor the succinct breakdown, nor the marshalling of ideas, nor the savvy and instinctive editing. It was the fact he included the C word in his narration and seems to have gotten away with it. Here to tell us how much of a gambit this was, whether he dallied over whether to go ahead with it, whether there may yet be any fallout, and how good it felt to drop a C-bomb in a video with seeming impunity, is Movie Cynic.
How's it going?
Good. So, all the details. I'm on the edge of my seat here.
Yeah, that actually does still have my butt clenched right now. So I lost sleep 2 nights in a row over worrying about using that C word, but I did go for it. So
I had to go back and like do it 2 times just to see what happened, and just I went back 5 or 10 seconds.
yeah, and I can
there it
also
is.
understand why you didn't stick around for the insights or anything, because none of my videos have that. So
Oh, please.
I have an avatar video, and it's one of the more harmless videos I've done, and it's demonetized because the algorithm heard me say the word count, and I'm really going out of my way to pronounce that as American as possible. I'll say count, right, like that, and it misinterpreted as a different word that would get this stream demonetized. So and there's nothing I can do about it because I appealed it, and the human reviewer said, no, you said that word, and now it's demonetized forever.
Yeah, I don't care. The video's at 500,000 views, so if they strike it now, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
The tricky one for Kiwis is dick and dick. So we sort of swallow the vowels a little bit there. So oftentimes if I talk about a deck chair, people are hearing like the dick chair, and so that has different connotations, I suppose.
Reminds me of Burn After Reading, if any of you saw that. There was a dick chair.
I saw that in the cinema, but I have since forgotten it. I recall it being a good movie, but I don't know. Maybe I was wrong. Is it any good?
I thought it was pretty good. One of those kind of forgettable, or I thought so at the time, but hey, I remember the chair. So
yeah. Was it the woman had the chair?
Yeah, the George Clooney's character made it for her, I believe.
Oh yes, now it's coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, we're all here gathered to talk, of course, about Rapunzel. But as a backup, we've also got Snow White. So here it is. The thing I wanted to lead off with, which I thought, I don't know, it's been bugging me and it seems really strange, is the screenwriter they brought in for this. I researched her, and her credits were Secretary, which was a kind of comedic drama about a lawyer and secretary who get up to various BDSM activities. And then another film about a guy who suffers from that syndrome or condition where you basically become like a animal-like with a hide of fur, and his story, and a kind of also weird sexual strange narrative there. And a third one about a married couple who fall apart and they both become addicted to prawn, and their son also addicted to prawn, and it follows the malaise of this American household. That's the person you rope in to do Snow White? It's very peculiar.
Well, she was the 7th person to get roped.
Yeah, that's true.
So you do got to keep that in mind, that this one was a real group effort.
So I wrote down some notes. I just want to go through them. The first is distinction and magic and spirit. Capturing the first film, the 1937 one. First of all, can you imagine what it would have been like to go into the cinema to see that for the first time? It must have been astonishing.
Yeah, that would have been
to
amazing.
Capture the imagination with audacious new technology that delights and enthralls. To a large extent, which Disney has sort of missed the point with in this iteration, the medium was the message. The story was almost kind of secondary to the fact of we can create magic out of nothing, and we can create a spirit and ebullience that comes off the screen and delights. That was the medium was the message. And the message of wholesomeness and virtue versus vanity and deceit and malignancy is a perfectly fine message also in and of itself. But transposing it into a tale of empowerment adds strain and sucks out the magic and spirit, because the character is turned into a dramatic heroine, or even at times an action drama heroine, divests the film of its simple appeal and delight and wistfulness, and gives it a heavy, plain literalism. So if the whole point of the Snow White and the original one was to be audacious and take risk with technology and showcase what your studio was capable of, and this new iteration shits the bed on that, then even if the film was considered average, that would still be a catastrophic failure.
Yeah, it was certainly a choice on this one. Interestingly though, it got me to go back and watch the original, which I haven't seen in years and years. I kept getting things mixed up, and I kept implanting Sleeping Beauty scenes into Snow White. And then through research, I found out that's because Sleeping Beauty was sort of a lot of the things they wanted to do in Snow White, and then their technical limitations at the time just wouldn't allow for the prince fighting and action sequence and stuff. And so they refined it, and then Sleeping Beauty was the full realization of what they wanted to do. But it was there were a lot of parts that I forgot about it that I really, really enjoyed. There were parts that were like, I was laughing out loud at some of the parts, especially when Grumpy is talking about her feminine wiles and how he doesn't want to catch them, even though he doesn't know what they are. He just knows that the female's got him and he's not going to get wild up. Then the other guys are going to get wiles. It was really so much better than I remember.
Yeah, they're like grumpy old men, but they're also like little kids who don't want to get girl germs at the same time. So it's kind of cute.
I was the same. I rewatched it, and the slapstick among the dwarves is brilliant.
Yeah.
It's so well animated. It's so well thought out, and it really emphasizes their characters. So, Dopey has his own sort of kind of slapstick where even the way it's drawn, where he has these longer lines, and he's falling over himself, and he's very sloppy. And then Grumpy has very sharp movements. It's brilliant. Whereas in this, it's just this kind of slop. I mean, we're going to talk about that later, but the way it's CGI, the way it's animated, the dwarves are just this indistinguishable kind of 7-headed blob. And it's Snow White is in everything the antithesis of the original, basically. It's so bizarre. It's like one movie sort of represents a brave, relatively new studio taking risks at the creative peak of a genius. And this represents the absolute worst of a legacy company that has become completely soulless and corporatized and is totally bereft, and not only bereft of, but utterly terrified of true creativity and innovation. They want nothing to do with it.
Disney's never really been like story-wise for the past, well, I wouldn't even say story-wise alone. For the past number of decades, they've just been buying up other things to supplement their, they're $1 billion company, but they purchased Pixar because they ceased making their own animated movies. And then they switched to doing live action remakes of their own films. And then they bought Marvel and they bought Star Wars. Like, this is just what they do now. Like you said, it really is the antithesis of what they were doing with the original Snow White in 1937. I had to go back and watch it too. I had never seen it. And when I first went and saw this abomination, I didn't like it, but I thought, I really should go watch the original so that I have some context here. And it made me hate this movie.
Yeah.
While I was watching it, I thought, just like you said, Echo, I was like, man, I bet this was just blowing people's minds when they were in the theater seeing it in the 30s. I bet it was just fantastic. Because it really is something special. Like, even to this day, I was like, why couldn't they have just adapted this? This does hold up. Like, you wouldn't have to change too much here.
Yeah. I think the only thing that they would have had to have done, and I get it, like, that when people say, well, it's a product of its time, or they make the old comments or whatever, and there is a little bit of validity to that some of the slapstick probably wouldn't be as amazing today, or some of just like the animation stuff there with older animation, you can tell when they're trying to save effort. And so, like, at one point they're falling asleep and there's a fly that's flying around and it lands on one of their noses. And basically that gets you a couple of seconds where all you need to do is animate the eyeballs following the fly around.
Yeah, right.
I was watching this documentary about how Wallace and Gromit was made, and that was why oftentimes he will twiddle his fingers, because they were like, well, it's a really easy way to just have something happening that doesn't take a ton, and you can stop motion that pretty easy, and it's a few seconds, and it's just kind of a cheat to pad the story a little bit. It adds personality. Like, he's very excited about the toast and he does the finger wiggle, but it's also just a way to have some movement that isn't full on walking and trying to progress the story and all of that. So I do understand how you could say stuff like that is not impressive anymore. Audiences are not going to be like, wow, look at the slapstick. This is so incredible. Like, it's still good, but it's not like the event that it would have been. And so I can understand how, okay, the audience is used to a little bit more complex storytelling. They want to know a little bit of backstory. They don't like things just happening for no reason. So that kind of stuff, if you want to tell the original and just sort of expand on that and adapt it to not so much modern sensibilities, but modern storytelling methods, that would be fine. But that's not what they wanted to do. And when they did try to do it with the prince to like explain where he came from, the execution was so sloppy that it's really not worth doing at all.
Yeah, the music as well gets to me. Besides the fact that the original, the songs and the music would kind of emerge naturalistically and be woven into the story better, whereas the new one is more like the kind of stop-start histrionic Broadway kind of stuff. But that's not the thing that pisses me off the most. It's there's a lot of musicians and guitarists on here. So if you think in terms of chords, the boring stuff you do is when you kind of do musically right angles. So you'd go from D chord, and then you'd go to A chord, and then you go to G chord, very geometric, very right angles.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think of the original Hey Ho, it's, it's got some of that old classical textures to it and ideas. So hey ho, and then dun, dun, just going up at an angle, like coming at like chords that transition chords. And I listen to the modern songs, and it's all just very hard right angles, very formulaic, very generic. No matter how much cheerfulness and self-discovery and belted high notes you put in there, and how many twisted little tremolo things you put in the end of it, it's still just vanilla, no matter how much you churn up the volume and imagine the amount of compression that goes on this music as well. I can't even imagine what that would look like.
It reminded me of Rent a lot. Like, it's got that modern Broadway feel, not so much the older, because I don't mind. I like Broadway musicals, and I'm fine with that. Like, I don't mind the feel of the music, but it does have the more modern, if we just belt stuff and we really just bring it home in the end, it'll sound great. But that's not the same, like you're saying, the complexity of the music is not quite there.
Yeah, that's one thing I've noticed with a lot of modern Broadway stuff, and because Disney, I call it Broadwayification, and that's what all their songs are like now. They're new songs, and it's essentially a series of musical phrases that they're obviously they're in the same key, and other than that, they don't really relate very well to each other. It's not like a single melody line with various motifs and musical ideas that are expounded on over the course of, say, 3 minutes. It's a bunch of musical phrases that may or may not relate to each other and are all over the register, like you say. Some of them sometimes you're belting and sometimes you're going very low, and it's partly designed to show off the vocal chops of Broadway singers. It's called a virtuoso piece. And Rachel Zegler has a a couple of virtuoso pieces in this, which she sings really well.
She does.
She's a terrific singer. And believe me, I know what I'm talking about. I tried to sing for years, and I could never really do it. I wasn't a good singer. I got to a point where I was a decent singer. I could get a song across, but I know how hard it is to sing. And she's a very good singer. But Gal Gadot's singing was hilarious, though. A lot of her stuff was just flat out replaced. I think some of it the auto-tune, by the way, Jesus Christ, the auto-tune. Some of it they auto-tuned, and some of it I think they just brought in a different singer because it was so broken they couldn't do anything else.
And it wasn't even singing. It was just like sort of whisper talking with a little bit of rhythm to it. It just
and with the accent made it really funny. I loved Gal Gadot in this.
She was vamping more than singing, I think.
She was the only part of the movie I enjoyed. She was the only part of it that was so bad it was good. It was very Madam Web, but the rest of it was even worse than that. I just couldn't enjoy anything else.
There's another thing that classical Disney used to do, which is so like in Wagner operas, for example, you'll have the characters who come on, and they'll have their own individual musical motifs that sort of introduce them or remind you of them. So their characterization has these little musical motifs. And they used to do that in Disney films and productions and things. So I kind of missed that because it's just embedded in there. And sometimes you're half conscious of it and sometimes you're not, but it does have that effect. So they just clunkily messed that up too. The other thing I wanted to discuss is this idea that when it comes to identity formulation, it's okay if people, like especially when they're really young, if they have like contradictory or kind of sweet and solemn parts to their nature that are a little bit kind of reflective or softer. So it's okay, I think, for little girls to also want to have that one day my prince will come part in there as an aspect of their identity when they're growing up, amid all the the empowerment, the stoicism, the resilience. You can have those little contradictions and flowing into layers. That's fine. So I wrote down, yeah, the idea of one day my prince will come as a wistful, sweet element of girlhood, and that's okay. You can have that nestled in among identity formulation with all the rest of it. The empowerment, the resilience, the stoic and independent. Those things don't have to be mutually exclusive. So a tale that leans more into the wistfulness doesn't have to be backward looking or dated. It can just speak to a part of your nature, which is solemn and sweet. And there's nothing really wrong with that. You know, as long as you get the balance, right?
Well, I think Rapunzel pulled that off, or Tangled, really. I think Tangled is probably their last really great balance of this, because she starts off singing basically a variation of When Will My Prince Come and When Will My Life Begin? And then Flynn shows up to essentially rescue her, although it's a little more argumentative and whatever. And she has moments of leadership and take charge, and then also moments of, more of a soft following type thing. He's taking the lead. They kind of go back and forth. They did a really good job balancing that with Tangled. And so they can do it. It's there. I think that was Disney Animation Studios. So that's in-house Disney. That's not even Pixar. I think sometimes they just don't want to. Like, they resent the fact that they were successful at that.
Yeah. So what is, on balance, what is better for young girls and their development from entertainment and cinema? On the one hand, you've got a film like this, which is heavy-handed and stolid and kind of spiritless, even if it's sincere in its messaging. Or, here's another example I wrote down, tumbling ebulliently out of the cinema, gabbling excitedly about how delightful the film was, singing the songs in the car ride home, dreaming and reliving the experience while they're drifting off to sleep, sharing in the collective exciting cultural experience, and having it as a touchstone of their youth, and being buoyed up by that, leaving an indelible, uplifting experience. Which, on balance, is better for young girls? Those two things.
Well, I think that answers itself, but I will talk briefly about Disney's motivation for this, because the original Snow White goes public in 2032, which is not far away. And Disney had that in mind. They felt, look, if we don't supersede the public idea and the sort of public, the idea and the image inside the public consciousness of what Snow White is, then it will be lost to us. Their original idea with this was that, not that some people think that by doing live action remakes, Disney extend the copyright. That's not true. The copyright for the original goes public, and there's nothing Disney can do about that. And they have tried. They've had lobbyists in Congress trying to do this. But they can't do that. So basically they decided, well, if we just remake all these movies, then we can create a new idea of the image of the characters inside the public consciousness and benefit from that. And that was what was going on with this. They were trying to supersede, literally, they wanted to, like, almost like the evil witch, they wanted to destroy the old Snow White. And then, Rachel Zegler and this piece of shit would be the new Snow White, and that would sell all the merch, and that would be re-released every 10 or 20 years, and people would forget about the original. And that was the idea here. And it's the idea with all of the live action remakes. And obviously that hasn't worked. When people think of The Little Mermaid now, they don't think of that disgusting piece of underwater noir garbage. They don't think of this rubbish. It's the worst movie genre of all time.
I think people will think of this movie, because I've had people message me that have nothing to do with this genre at all. They don't have, friends of mine in real life who have absolutely no affiliation with being in this corner of YouTube. And they all know all about this movie and how terrible the word of mouth is on it. So that's how this is going to be remembered. And I think it will be remembered in a bigger way than even Madam Web's become a meme. This has become the absolute meme.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I saw a YouTuber yesterday, Jester Bell, she has a small movie channel. She posted a poll asking, will this be remembered as a historically bad movie, or will it just be forgotten? And 75% said it will be forgotten. Although I agree with Movie Cynic, I think this will be remembered as a historic disaster.
And I was also wondering too, I was having a discussion right before I started writing my script, and I had just finished the original, and I was having a discussion with my girlfriend about, like, why does every remake that Disney seems to have to have the girl boss, or like Captain Marvel is the quintessential version of that for the MCU and stuff. And why is it such a bad thing to present like other aspects of femininity. It's the only thing that they can present now, or it feels like, because I haven't seen every Disney movie. I don't have kids, Greg, so I haven't.
But
watched
you're right.
all.
Maybe Cynic. Disney have not had a love interest in their original movies since I think 2013. Am I right about that, Greg? 12 years.
When was the last one? Moana didn't have one.
None of them have had one for the past 12 years. They were going to have one for Wish, but then they scrapped it at the last minute because Girl Boss.
I guess since Frozen. Frozen. When was that? That was sooner than 13, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think so. That feels like
No, that was
2015 or
2013.
16. Oh, okay.
No, Frozen was 2013. So it's been 12 years
Wow.
since
Yeah.
Disney
That
have
was the
had
last
a
one.
love interest. And that's just
Jesus, that is
bizarre. It's
bad.
like, what is everybody? I mean, they knew this. What was the name of that song? You know, everybody needs somebody. Everybody needs somebody to love. It's true.
Mhm.
Everybody needs somebody to love. Everybody does.
Yeah.
Why would a woman want to be single? That's fucking boring, and it's weird, and it's bizarre, and it's going to lead to horrible sexual frustration. This is just strange.
I mean, she has one in this, but it's also this odd, when you juxtapose it with the original, it's this odd downgraded version of him. He's not a prince. He's way below her on every level, because he's this like thieving vagabond in this movie instead of a prince who's going to come and rescue her.
What part of Rachel Zegler's face did he actually kiss?
So right here.
Was it like the upper chin, the lower lip?
Yeah, the camera was on the other. They did you know for a fact that in the original cut the kiss wasn't in it, right? Because woke. And then they've thought, oh, but there's going to be a big backlash, so let's just put it in there. But they did everything they could to make it as sort of unromantic and sexually sterile as possible. And the way they positioned the camera, you can't really even see where the kiss lands.
Yeah, it was strange. It's like a graze more than a kiss.
Yeah.
Peculiar.
I couldn't get over his hoodie that clearly just got picked up from like Old Navy or some shit. Like that was not that. The whole band of Mary Persons, none of their costumes fit.
Marry individuals. Certain members of those individuals may identify as pluralities.
That is
like
very
Ezra
true.
Miller.
Could be twin-souled furries.
Yep. Or twin-spirited as the Native American, because in the whole Native American twin spirit. You're being very offensive here, Greg. I'm just going to call you out on this, man.
I understand. I am very bigoted. That to me, that's the biggest signal that you're watching 2 or possibly 3 movies smashed together, is that those costumes don't fit anywhere in this movie at all. And that tells me that there was a whole separate storyline that they did with them. And then because of public pressure, did the magical creatures, CGI abominations, which I will say, I thought they were funny. I thought Doc was very funny. His little quippy asides to himself, half heard. I did think that their voices were, I liked Grumpy. I liked Doc in this one. We'll get Dopey to speak and it'll be inspirational storyline was stupid, but the rest of them I really thought they had a lot of heart to the movie. But it feels like that was all an afterthought, and that's why their dress matches everybody else. Well, their dress doesn't match the kingdom dress, and the bandits don't match the kingdom dress. So you're looking at 3 completely different costume departments. And it's
I love how
yeah.
the Little Mermaid in this ended up in the same cosmopolitan, liberal California paradise vision. So the Little Mermaid ended with, there's a whole bunch of mermaids that emerge, like a huge mermaid community, and some of them have got pink tails and blue tails, and there's ethnically diverse mermaids and mermen everywhere, and there's a strong girl boss at the center of it. And then this ends with hysterically intense frolicking of a ethnically diverse utopian vision with a strong girl boss thing. That's it. That's the core DNA of what they want out of these films. And that's what they get off on, is those final little sequences, more than the love interest.
They're in the ocean trying to look like they're treading.
It was so good. I took that scene and put a corporate DEI voiceover over the top of it. So it was something like, at DuPont, we value diversity in our hiring.
Yeah.
And it was so perfect. It just matched up so perfectly.
You ever taste a rainbow? Savor, you will.
So it's all over the place on the internet. It hasn't quite been locked down. So we need to do the timeline of how this all unfolded. So they were filming the bandits, and we're pretty much locked in and airtight that that was going to be the plot that probably
Yeah.
already filmed, and then the photo got leaked. So if the photo hadn't been, would they have gone all the way through with that?
They would have had to, because once they would have finished, they finished most of principal photography with the bandit storyline where there were no dwarves, and basically, I think
That was in 22.
they decided to just. What are you saying, Greg?
I think that was in 22, right?
Was
Yeah,
that prior to Dinklage or post Dinklage?
That was post Dinklage, because it was post Dinklage, because Dinklage came out and he said he didn't want the dwarves in it because he's a wanker.
Yeah.
He wanted to cosplay as a victim.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think that the original. This is what I get. My guess for the original story was basically Snow White becomes Robin Hood. So Snow White runs away through the forest when the huntsman lets her go, or who knows, maybe she just girl bosses the huntsman to death, and then she runs off through the forest, and then she comes across this merry band of diverse individuals, and then she becomes their leader because she's just such a fucking girl boss. They have to make her their leader. And then through girl bossery for the rest of the movie and, resisting the queen, she overthrows the queen, and then she's the queen at the end. And that's basically it. I think that was what the original plot was.
Okay, and then what happened? So release of the image, and then they've got a decision. So we look ridiculous now, but that's clashing against what Peter Dinklage said. So we have to decide who we're going to aggravate, and we have to make a decision, because did they say we look foolish because we don't have dwarves? We've been exposed, and therefore we've got to put in dwarves. And then they also said, but we've got to retain these people because we've sunk 60, 70, 80 million into building up that thing, so we can't dispense with them. So we've got to have these dwarves. The CGI dwarves have to be all Caucasian. I don't quite understand why. Whereas the bandits get to be ethnically diverse. I don't understand why. But you've also got one bandit who's also a little person as like a salve or like a... So I don't know what's going on there. So the timeline breaks up in my head, and my head explodes after a while. I can't lock it down.
It's
So I don't
a
know.
massively confusing mess. I can tell you that.
Well, the Queen said something like basically alluding to him being Robin Hood. And I'm going to defer to Cynic because he fucking saw this twice somehow.
I did.
Didn't she say something like, "Aren't you the bandit who's been robbing the rich in the woods?" Or so? Like, wasn't that part of an early conversation where she pretty much was like, "You're Robin Hood, right?" And winked at the camera, and then we were supposed to know who he was.
Yeah, I think that was because they basically did the same thing. The writing in this movie is so trash. well, I want to break that down at some point, but they basically do the same scene twice because he gets captured the first time, and I think that's when she says that about him, and then they capture him once again at the end of the second act and bring him in front of the Queen again, and they basically have the same conversation.
She's a powerful leader.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, not a great film then. So they did manage to essentially offend Dinklage by including the little person, but no, they got around. They did a go around because he's not in a cave, which Dinklage got wrong anyway because they're in a nice little cottage. So he's.
I don't think Dinklage ever saw the movie. I think he was just cosplaying as a victim.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, he was just. He was on a podcast, and I think you're allowed to just, if you're on a live show or whatever, you're allowed to just talk, and you can backtrack stuff because you didn't sit there and think it through, and it just came out of your mouth. But he had all the time in the world to backtrack that, and he didn't. So I guess he just wanted to stick to his guns on it. Because I put a clip, I did 2 videos on this, the actual review, and then like one a few months ago. And I put the actual clip in from the podcast he was on, and he's just sitting there running his mouth about like, I can't believe we're in his super deep voice for a little guy. I can't believe we're still doing this, and we're still like what the fuck are we doing, man? We're putting dwarfs in fucking caves, man.
That was good. All right, so let's do just for my sake, I'm going to choose Greg for this. Can you give us the catharsis of how it should have gone? So it's 2022 Disney Expo, whatever it is. I'm the interviewer. I'm putting a microphone in your face, and all you have to do is say the conventional, safe, and decent thing. Are you ready? So So Rachel, this upcoming Snow White film production, I think everyone is looking forward to this. Can you give us maybe just a couple of little insights, and how do you feel about this film, and what does it mean to you, and what is this film going to mean to everyone?
Well, I'm really proud because I think a lot of white men, cis-het white men, are looking forward to it to reaffirm their misogynistic tendencies because they want women to clean and cook for them. But we're not going to do that. What I want to be excited are young girls who are going to look at this powerful version of a female character that doesn't need a prince to come save her. She saves herself. As a matter of fact, in the version that we wrote, and I'm going to use the word we to include myself, even though I didn't actually write any of it. The version that we wrote, the princess actually saves herself from herself because she's so powerful. She is both the protagonist and antagonist. She's the negatagonist. That's the word that I believe she would use. So she's all three parts. She's the savior and the hero and the villain. That's how powerful she is. That's the version that we wrote. So sorry, fellas, this one's for you, ladies. I'm with her.
Wow. No, my soul isn't satisfied. Cynic, I'm chucking it over to you. Just a nice, sensible, decent PR thing that doesn't ruffle any feathers. So Rachel, this new Snow White feature, what can you tell about us? And especially, what does it tell us about love, and what can people expect from this beautiful new feature that is a cornerstone of Disney?
Oh, well, you're going to learn that a woman doesn't need no man. And if he is around, he's just going to serve you in a certain way. And by the way, if he saves you, you got to save him twice. So that's what I'm going to do in this movie. Yeah. Now,
well, I could try and shove it over to Despot, but he'll be even more acid. So that's probably not worth it. But what we can look at is here. So the sleepy 43 million. I've almost had the sneaking suspicion, just in a vague abstract sense, that this might not actually make its money back. It's just a strange feeling I have.
I don't think so. This got a B+ cinema score, which cinema score has to be taken with a grain of salt. Like it's graded on a curve, because cinema score is what they take when like the first night. It's a poll, and so those are the people that are most likely going to be kind to the movie, or at least kinder. So a B+ is the lowest a live action Disney remake has ever gotten. And like, for example, for comparison, Captain America 4 got a B-, and that had one of the biggest drops in MCU history. So this is just not, you can look at anything. You can look at IMDb, you can look at Rotten Tomatoes that has like a 73% audience score. This is not good across the board. Reviews from professionals and from people actually attending the theater are not good. This movie is going to fall off the face of the earth. So I really don't think it's going to make its money back. Not for at least 50 years. It's not going to make it back in theaters, I can tell you that.
Right, well, we have a request, so I guess we've got to go through it and do the trifecta. Rachel, it's a privilege to have you here. If I can just have a moment of your time. Snow White, obviously a beloved classic. So you'll be, really delighted to be able to fill the shoes of this iconic role that's brought so much happiness to so many generations. What are just a couple of thoughts that you might have on the film and what we might be able to look forward to?
Well, you can look forward to a beautiful little movie with some lovely new ideas, but also a great tribute to the old ideas. We're also inspired by the old movie, and I really just can't wait to see how the audience reacts. It's been so much fun. All my cast and crew are wonderful, except Gal Gadot. She's a Jewish bitch, and I hate her. And it's going to be fantastic. I can't wait to watch that in the cinema.
Well, apart from that one little subclause, you actually saved Disney $30 million. Well done. In fact, in this day and age, that might have actually flown as well. So who knows?
Probably would, huh?
Yeah. So the other issue is that there are comparable films, sort of in this kind of range, but in the particular time of year, it's not going to have legs, because if you release it in more like a holiday season, you're going to have those longer weekends. People are more likely and prone to go to the cinema if it's later in the year. So it's going to fail there. This isn't the kind of film that like teachers or educators will just generically choose to put on in the background to keep the kids busy while they're doing something else, or like a teacher-only day or something like that. So it's just going to fade and die. And it will be interesting to think, like in a year's time, will we just go, oh yeah, I totally forgot about that? Or will it just reside as having its own little place in our subconscious forever? I don't know.
I feel like it's a landmark of bad. So I think it is going to stick around. Like Snow White will be a new barometer, kind of how we have Madam Web for a barometer, a different kind of bad. You know, it's like the room of superhero movies. This is just, in generally speaking, going to be looked at as a stain on cinema.
Yeah,
I think it will be a
movie. In terms of the movie itself, I think the only part of the movie that will get remembered. So people still remember the lines from Madam Web, you know, because those are great lines. Like, "Where is my spider? They took my spider." Or
spiders were worth it, Mom.
"Hope the spider." That's a great line. Or you know, "You saved my mom," and then you were super weird about it. Like, just awesome lines. Whereas there's nothing to remember from this. It's all forgettable except the CGI abomination dwarves. I think that will be remembered as just as sort of like the way we remember like Ant-Man 3. The only thing you would remember about that movie is MODOK. It'll be a bit like that, except you know, Cynic
and communist ants.
Communist.
Yeah.
The funny thing is that this will be remembered mostly for imagery from the trailer rather than the film itself, which is kind of funny.
I think what we'll remember it for too is that it caps off when a lot of journalist outlets gave up, and that's what I'll remember. Because this, when you really look at it, like, is this really that much worse than a lot? I mean, these other examples: Brave New World, Ant-Man 3, The Marvels. Like, there have been a lot of stinkers, and what I'll remember about this one is finally, you know, Variety and New York Times and all these folks just finally went, fuck it. Let's just be honest. It sucks, when they were trying to carry water for all those other movies and they've just given up.
I think this will be the first one where they don't have. Well, it actually turned out, surprisingly, despite all the haters, to actually be a success, because it had the third highest rating for a seventh day non-Memorial weekend. Seen through this particular filter on a Tuesday from 4 to 6 p.m. So
in fact, here's this movie is the third highest grossing all-time wide release starring a Latina in a starring female role alongside a Jewish actress. So there you fucking shot.
I think if Disney writes to the ship, then this will be referred to. So, you know, prior to Disney writing the ship and rediscovering its magic, it had sunk to a particular low with disconnect with audiences, highlighted perhaps most of all by its iteration of Snow White. So if it will be remembered, it will be that as like the cautionary tale when the thing bottomed out. So that's where I think it'll lie. So this takes us on to a wider dynamic of a conversation, which is slop.
Oh, it's nice. That's really nice. Like, did you do that?
Isn't that nice? Yeah, I did that.
That's so much better than what I did.
That looks really good.
Damn it, you're making me look bad, man.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So when we think of slop, we tend to think AI, like AI slop. But as we were talking a couple of days ago, I think that it's starting to widen now. From people are thinking woke, they're thinking post-woke, they're thinking woke is kind of played out, that culture war thing has kind of gone into entropy a little bit. What comes after? What's the next phase? And I think if you have woke product and you sort of take some of the woke out of it, or the woke becomes inert because everyone's in on it now, then what you're left with is just slop. So we're moving from an era of woke to an era of slop. So it's a hard thing to kind of quantify, but Despot, if you would have a go, what would your sort of definition be?
All right, bring up my slides, because I thought about this and I thought, well, what? It's still somewhat nebulous. So I made this: the age of woke is over, the time of slop has come, which I think is true. I think who knows what will be the sort of the culturally dominant force in Hollywood after woke, but I do think Snow White is the swan song of the woke era, and you'll still have woke stuff. I mean, probably The Last of Us 2 and some other stuff will come out down the pipeline, but it's pretty much as a cultural, same with the superhero era. You know, the era ended in 2023, but we'll still have the odd superhero movie. It's a bit like that. So, but yeah, everything post woke I think is just going to feel like slop. And if you go to the next slide.
So we're kind of at, it's like 1944 And there's like Operation Bagration, and sometimes the Germans can still get the occasional victory now and then, but people are kind of looking beyond the horizon to post-war because they feel that the war is kind of over.
And the smart, like the George Orwells of the world, are beginning to realize that the Cold War is coming, kind of thing.
Oh, here's you putting yourself down. Look at that. You got look at the angles on the content. That's great.
Yeah. So basically, you've got.
Oh, that's someone else's.
No, this is mine. This is mine.
Oh, that's yours. Well, who's the dude?
I've included. Oh, this guy's an easy YouTuber.
That's Moist Critical.
That's right.
Yeah, I consider him like sort of a slop tuber. Like he produces just slop videos on a large scale.
I like watching him though.
Yeah. It's very consumable. Now, that's the thing about slop. Slop isn't terrible. Slop is it's consumable, I'll say. Some of it is terrible, but some of it's watchable.
Such a soothing voice.
So here's some of the defining characteristics of slop. It's excessively reliant on established tropes. It's not at all interested in innovation. It just wants to do what's been done before, and because that works and audiences are familiar with it. It's low effort across the board. So pretty much in every department, nobody gives a fuck. And a good example of this, we'll get into some examples later on. Probably use of AI. So one thing I've noticed, and I would be interested to hear your opinion on this, because I've heard a lot of dialogue in movies recently, and instantly I think ChatGPT, because it's so trite and it's so formulaic, and it's like, not that I don't even think the Hollywood studios are necessarily aware that there is AI in their scripts. It's more like there's a script meeting tomorrow morning. The writer hasn't fucking done half her work, so she decides, a gorgeous wee bit of ChatGPT maybe wouldn't hurt too much. She brings out ChatGPT to finish up the script, and then she just rewrites some of it. I think there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
Utterly lacking in passion. You can just tell from the actors, the costume department, CGI, nobody cares. There's just no passion, no heart in this thing. It's politically indifferent, and this is important. This is not to say it's apolitical. It is to say no one involved cares about the politics. They don't care one way or the other. Oh yeah, it's whatever. It's a piece of shit. Who cares? Oh, it's conservative. Yeah, whatever. They don't care about the politics. It's politically indifferent. It's instantly forgettable. So you watch it, and 5 minutes later, you cannot remember it, or you don't care to remember it. Importantly, it's basically watchable or playable, because we're talking about games here as well. Ubisoft, or Ubislop, as many people call them, have become the masters of slop games. It's playable. You can just about continue playing minute on minute. Then it has zero rewatchability or zero replayability if it's a game. It gets far worse on an attempted rewatch. So if you watch a slop movie and then try to watch it again, you'll just think, Jesus, why was that entertaining to me? A good example.
I like the phonetic, and this is very good. Spot on. No one cares.
For example, Spider-Man No Way Home is a slop movie, and when you try to rewatch it, you realize that. Zero cultural impact, so just leaves nothing behind, has no influence, because it's not original in any way or innovative in any way.
Yep.
So I thought it would look at some, even Hollywood has caught on to it. This is from the Hollywood Reporter or something. The rise of slop is entertainment media really in a terminal death spiral. So even the mainstream is aware of the slop phenomenon.
Well, what I've got, we can ping pong between us, because I've got like a series of pairs, and I thought there's 4 of them. And we can just go through and decide which is the more slop out of the 2 and why. So I'll just put yours there for a second and put mine up. And 2 other characteristics I'd have is extraordinary color, ridiculous rich saturated color, and it's got 1 or 2 people that you think are pretty cool in it, and that's enough for you to sort of chuck it on. So here's our first pairing. Which is the more slop out of these 2? Now, bear in mind, you don't have to have seen it to make a judgment call on this, because that's actually part of the sloppiness of the slop, is the fact that you didn't get around to seeing it, but if it was on, then maybe you'd leave it on. So surely Borderlands would be the purest example of slop.
100%. It's Borderlands.
Yeah.
I'll tell you guys what I've seen. Part of Fall Guy. It's actually not terrible. It is sloppy, but it's as far as the effort goes, there was medium effort put into Fall Guy.
Yeah, I'm going to go through all of Despot's criteria would be met by both of these, but probably more in Borderlands. It's got the couple of people you recognize, and kind of they're pretty cool, super colorful, no rewatchability, no cultural impact, whatever. You can go through all of them, and Borderlands would be perfect.
It is. The Fallout guy is very close, but the problem with that, and it's a bad movie, but it's got a little bit of passion in there. There's a little bit of heart. You know, there are people that care in the production. Both Gosling and Emily Blunt are trying. They're not phoning it in. And I think the director, he was trying with this. It just didn't land. So there's a little bit of passion there. It's almost slop. It is basically a slop movie, but it's just not quite there. Whereas Borderlands, it's slop. Nobody gave the biggest fuck.
Well, let's try. So these two, Electric State or Captain America: Brave New World. Which is the purest slop out of these two?
This is so much.
That's
more
a tough
difficult.
one.
I'm gonna say Electric State, because with Captain America: Brave New World, it's an abysmal movie, but they reshot it and they rewrote it a bunch of times, and they tried to make it good, and it ended up this sort of Frankenstein's monster of a movie. But no one cared. Like, no one involved in the project ever became passionate about it, and it's all tropes. It's all. I mean, even Captain America looks ridiculous. I'm just gonna call him. I will do a review this at least at the end of the year. I'm just gonna call him Captain Swiss Army Man, because he's just this hodgepodge of different superhero bits and pieces from the past 10 years. And that's the movie. He's like a microcosm of the movie. The movie itself is just this massive hodgepodge of junk from the past 10 to 15 years of superhero movies, 20 years even.
So if it's too patched together to be pure slop, I think he's onto something there. I think pure slop, it wouldn't even go through the processes of that. It would just exist as pure slop.
Electric State. And here's the thing. Captain America is awful, but it doesn't necessarily know how bad it is. The Electric State knows for a fact that it is utter shite. Chris Pratt is playing himself. Millie Bobby Brown is playing generic American high schooler. You know, and she's not very convincing. It's so jarring when they call her kid. It's like, stop calling this woman in her mid-20s kid.
I know. I saw her on the rope line of the red carpet, and she looked 34.
Yeah, she looks like she's in her 40s.
I know. She looked like a regular on Coronation Street, like the super
I'm going to say
heavy
the
makeup.
Electric Slate. The Electric Slate. No one cares. There's absolutely zero passion. The CGI is indifferent.
Yeah,
it's slime, man.
See, the only disagreement that I have with you is I think Captain America, the changes were not to try to make it good. The changes were to try to make it slop, because I think Disney thought slop was less offensive than what it originally was about. I think Malcolm Spellman had this. He thought he was Spike Lee, I think, with the first Captain America iteration that he put in, and then Disney tried to slopify it to neutralize that. But you're right, Electric State, it was start to finish, nobody gave a shit at all.
Yeah, a sluggish lack of plot points where you don't feel like you're going anywhere as you get from one sluggish kind of trite plot point to another. So I think that's an element. Rebel Moon versus
Rebel Moon
like 18 times. We knew where we were going.
Rebel Moon.
But Zach thinks that he's an auteur, and he thinks that he's trying to do something special. So, but it can still be slop even if the guy is trying.
I just have so much hate in my heart for Zack Snyder movies that it's Rebel Moon. That was the worst movie that came out last year to me.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go red one on this one, because I think that Dwayne the Rock
here's
Johnson...
the problem, Cynic, is that the Rebel Moon stirred feelings from you, so that disqualifies it.
Damn it!
The thing is, Rebel Moon is almost. I haven't seen Red One, but Rebel Moon is so bad that it's kind of good in parts, and there's like Zack Snyder was really passionate about it. It's just a gigantic misfire.
He's an idiot. So,
but Red One. I mean, yeah, Dwayne the Rock Johnson. You'll see this in my own slides. I included just his movies in general, because he is the OG slop master. That guy is
you just imagine all these
He's
people
never made a memorable movie, and his
all
movies
these people
are all formulaic trash.
All their agents have exactly the same conversation. Like, it's a dud film. It's dumb. It's silly. It's consumable. But you'll make this amount of money. It'll take you 6 weeks. I'll make sure you've got a really good trailer. You're going to have 6 scenes that'll take this long. In and out, you'll be fine. Nice paycheck. You'll hang out with the guys. There'll be a couple of good laughs, and then we'll just move on to this other project you're interested in. That is the conversation every single agent had with every single cast member on Red One.
But so there's 2 caveats there. Is there a difference between kid slop and adult slop? Because that was meant to be kid slop. So you give it points for that, and then do you take into account that Dwayne Johnson thought that this shit was going to sell out IMAXs. Like, I don't think that it was slop in his mind. I think he was just as serious as
No, he thought it would sell out the IMAX because it was slop.
He doesn't think in artistic terms.
That's
Everything
true.
he does, he thinks in commercial terms. He's not an artist. He's a businessman.
It's a good point. It's a good point. I think the last one that I remember him in was Central Intelligence. Because Are You Down with the Corns, I think is it's an iconic character. Loves unicorns and fanny packs. It's fucking awesome.
Slop pumper. That sounds like a porn waiting to happen. And then the last would be Rings of Power versus Section 31, which is the purest slop.
Ooh, that's really tough. Well, I'd say Section 31. I think there's effort behind Rings of Power in certain departments. It's just wasted by the fucking appalling writing. So Rings of Power, if the writing was good, it'd be a really good production because the CGI, some of the costumes are good. Some of the costumes are bad, but some are very good. Some good acting. It does have some redeeming aspects. Just the writing is so dreadful. It just shits all over everything else. Whereas Section 31 is just irredeemable in every single department.
Yeah. So I think I would go Borderlands versus Section 31 for pure slop. Those would be my finalists, I think.
I think I would still do Borderlands.
I think so. Yeah, I think Borderlands is pure modern slop. Just because how colorful it is, how stupid it is, how no one's invested in it.
I mean, it even had like joke lines, like lines that people joke about being terrible lines, like they're right behind me, aren't they? Like that's a joke that you tell to talk about bad writing, and they put it in the movie on purpose. Like,
right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go back to Despot's one here, and you can continue on. Oh, where's it gone? I was wearing the slides. Well, let's see, as a microphone. Borderlands, because of the sheer color saturation, is a big feature for me, I think. All right. So anyway, Despot, we're back to yours, and you can take us through again.
I mean, this has even become an issue on YouTube. A lot of channels, it's just make consumable content. So, Mr. Nonce is in there, and, a lot of the rest. And I'm sure you recognize some of these thumbnails, and it's just sort of slop content to be consumed. That's its main function. So we talked about the Electric State. It's no coincidence that me and Echo both hit on that. That is a perfect paragon of a slop movie. I've just included this for Greg's benefit. Greg,
that's
what are we looking
HBO
at
Max right there. Do you think HBO Max makes slop content? Because I feel like HBO Max is they're trying to still do like full productions over at HBO Max. So I feel like they're doing okay.
All right. Dwayne The Rock, everything he does, like even the way he's just the exact same character in every movie. It's all who can name like 3 Dwayne Johnson movies? No one, because they're instantly
not even Dwayne Johnson.
I can't name the movies. I can just name the pitch. Saving Helicopter, Earthquake, California, Tugboat through Jungle River. So I can just do the pitch. I don't know the titles.
And he basically plays the same character. He just plays the big tough guy who reluctantly gives his help to the dweebs, that kind of character. And it's just it's the sloppiest content out there.
So help me out with this, because here's what's weird. Like, and I'm being all contrarian tonight, but so I agree with you. Don't like him. But then I don't know how to reconcile the fact that I can watch Jason Statham movies like non-fucking stop. Like it doesn't, like the Working Man. I want to go see Working Man so
fuck yes.
bad.
I cannot wait for that. Oh my god.
Like anytime he's there, and when there's a movie where a character goes into somebody else's secret back room and there's guns lining the walls, and that character is like, so what can I suit you up with, or some shit, I fucking go crazy for it every time. And it's Jason Statham's been making the exact same movie for 20 years, and I eat him
Jason
all
Statham's an actual actor, I think. He can convince me that he's a badass. Dwayne Johnson is just a guy who is acting.
That's true. He's relying on his former wrestling persona to sell the comedy most of the time.
Yeah, he's still The Rock.
What's supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that new one with Jason Statham, it's co-written by Sylvester Stallone. Jesus Christ, I can't wait. It's going to be awesome. I mean, The Beekeeper is one of my favorite films of last year. I love the shit out of that film.
We discussed that pile of shit. This was another one that's just pure.
Oh,
fucking
yeah.
slop. This movie is just like you said to ChatGPT, write a superhero origin story movie. They took it, they didn't even bother making any changes to the script, and they just filmed it. That's it. That is
most
Blue
of the
Beetle.
chat just went, "Oh yeah, that was out
Mhm.
a year ago or 2 years
There
ago."
are literally lines in this that, like, there's a line where I call him Red Lobster. I don't know what he's called. So Red Lobster, who's the bad guy, he's attacking Blue Beetle. And by the way, that's another trope. The bad guy or the head henchman is just a bigger version of the hero.
Yeah.
You saw that in Iron Man 1, where Tony Stark has to fight the CEO, and the CEO is in this giant mech suit. That's basically the same here. So Blue Beetle has to go and fight Red Lobster, and Red Lobster's beating him up, and Red Lobster says, "You do not deserve this power." And that exact line is in one of the Hulk movies where the Abomination has Hulk up against the wall, and he says, "You don't deserve this power." It's just purest slop. And
I have a slightly different perspective. I think we can delineate a line between a pre-modern era of slop and this new era of slop. And I think this actually is on the other side of that curtain, as it was like towards the tail end of what they were doing, phase whatever, I don't care. But I think over the last year, as we transition out of woke, we've gone into slop. And there's a very clear delineation where it's ratcheted up in the last year. And I think this is slightly prior to that.
Well, in this movie, you're right in the sense that in this movie, they made a huge deal that it was a Latino movie. Everyone's a Latino, and this is the first time we have seen a Latino actor in a movie, and all this shit. So there's an aspect of that. They were really leaning hard into that kind of, let's just call it woke identity politics marketing. Whereas, you're right, with a slop movie, you wouldn't get so much of that.
The amount, I remember, what was it, last year or 2 years ago, the amount of mental energy I had to expend to continually remind myself that this film existed and that it was coming up. Because it just kept slipping out of my brain. It just wouldn't fix in my brain.
Alien Romul asks, this is slop. This is slop. And I even the director, Fede Alvarez, I don't think there's no passion in this. He just doesn't care. And a perfect example of this is the scene where the
autistic droid says, "Get away from her, you bitch."
That's one of it. That's one of them. It's like, well, we need to have the line. He has to say the line, and they couldn't figure out how or where he could say it. So they at the end they just threw up their hands and said, "Fuck it." He's going to jump on top of the alien. He's going to shoot it, and then he's going to say the line. And there's another scene where the actual parasites come out of a wall, and they're all attached to these. They're in 3D molds attached to molds inside this detachable this wall that shoots out. And it's like, why would anyone do that? Why would you put these dangerous parasites that could wipe out an entire ship, a large number of them, inside basically a sauna room in fucking plastic packets? Why wouldn't you put them in a cage or something? It just, but this movie doesn't care because you're not supposed to ask questions. You're just supposed to look at it and go, so good, said the line. I know Echo's a big fan of this movie. I'm not trying to offend you, Echo, but
this is the thinking man, the doofus who thinks that they're a thinking man. This is their slop product, where they can feel that they're watching something which has some vague touch of prestige or something to it, so they can feel like that, where it is just pure slop. And the momentum of it, people wandering down hallways and then wandering down another hallway and then trying to find their way into a door, and that door leads into another room, but that door is locked, so they're stuck in that room until they can get out of that room, and then they can go up to an elevator shaft, and then they can go from one spaceship onto another spaceship. Just this flat, horizontal storytelling. So fuck this film. Yeah, I think so. We need another term for this. It's something slop. Prestige slop or pseudo prestige slop?
Pseudo prestige slop. Well, that's too wordy. You need it to be 2 words. Prestige slop.
I think for this, for example, my experience watching this in the theater, when he says, when the autistic droid says the line, I had a person sitting behind me go, "Oh my God, he said it." And so I say nostalgia slop.
Nostalgia slop's not a pretty good one.
Yeah, that's good.
Slap. Not fucking good.
The only thing worse than that, Cynic, was when I was watching Oppenheimer, and then the bomb explodes and there's silence, and the guy behind me goes, "Oh shit."
All right,
Fuck
so those
that
are my
crap.
slides.
Okay.
That's just a few thoughts because it's an important, it's a growing cultural element,
Mhm.
and I think it's important that we sort of develop a common vernacular to describe this post woke cultural cancer that
Yeah.
slop has that it is.
Mhm.
Blah.
Well, this is jumping around a lot, Greg. I can't quite get a fix on it. It's hard to make a call on whether Shadows is below, meeting, or exceeding Ubisoft's expectations without knowing what those expectations were. So it seems to be humming along pretty well with the sales. That's not really the issue. The issue is in terms of like cost analysis. I guess that's the issue, but it doesn't seem to be flopping. It seems to be humming along pretty well on Steam.
You know what? I forgot to look for the sales numbers.
Well, I got while you're looking that up, Assassin's Creed Shadows Steam sales also pale in comparison to summer 2025's true mega hits so far. 3 days after launch, Shadows has apparently sold 310,000 copies.
Oh no,
and
that's not good at all.
In a similar time frame, Split Fiction shifted 882,000, and the gargantuan monster Hunter Wilds sold almost 10 times better than Shadows, 3.7. And I'm sure their budgets were lower too.
Yeah, so as far as video games go, like with a big company like this, I know that the last Assassin's Creed game, Valhalla, shipped a couple million units. With these bigger companies, with the amount of money and the amount of time they spend, typically they need like 5 million copies or more sold, and it's going to be more than what they have on Steam because they do sell some on their own launcher. But it's that 300,000 number, even if they're selling 3 times that on their own platform, that's still 1 million copies, and that's just not. It's not going to make them back what they've been spending historically on games. Last year, they released a game at the beginning of the year that reportedly they spent $600 million on. And that's, give or take 100 because the reports are kind of all over, but it's hundreds of millions that they spent on that game that didn't go anywhere. Other games, same reports that they're spending $200-400 million, and to make the money back on that, you need insane numbers of sales to get people, one, to just pay the sticker price, and then also get them in to charge them extra money for different outfits or experience boosts or whatever the hell they're trying to hawk over there. No, those are a few 100,000 units sounds great, but in terms of a large studio like that, that's not good. Last year,
I understand in this game you've got to pay an extra $50 in order for Yasuke to visit Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah, they held that one back for you to get your extra money. But I mean, Star Wars Outlaws reportedly needed 2 or 3 million copies of that sold to break even or feel comfortable or whatever it was. They weren't getting that, and it cost far less. That was thrown together much more hastily. This is a flagship franchise for the studio. I mean, it is Assassin's Creed is kind of synonymous with Ubisoft at this point. It's like Far Cry is another one of their series that's just it's like a core name that goes with them, and they would have needed 10 million copies to make profit, or 5 million I've heard, but they need many more than they're getting right now.
I'm not much of a gamer, but for some reason YouTube just threw me a random bone and showed me just all it is someone just recording themselves walking through a game just to show off the landscapes, and it's mesmerizing. I don't know what the game was. It was just set in revolutionary Paris, and it's just a character trudging and walking through. I was just blown away by just looking, because I felt the immersion. Like, I feel I'm in this place, and you get to walk through the buildings, and you get a sense of grandeur and space and proportion. It's incredible stuff. But I'm never going to become a gamer because that'll be too much of a time sink, and I'll probably get addicted to it in some weird way.
Yeah, it'll suck you right in.
Cynic, are you much of a gamer?
I just started gaming again after a few years, but Nintendo stuff. I actually just bought like 3 or 4 of the older Assassin's Creed games on my Switch. I don't know if I'll be touching this one though.
Well, my gaming pretty much ended with Tekken. I did Yoshimitsu. He was my guy, and that's pretty much where I left gaming. Let's do a couple of little super chats here. James Bronte, I'm assuming that's Australian $20. Great live stream. Echo Team. It's great. Well, yeah. Echo Base, Echo Team. Thanks, dude. Appreciate that. Hemorrhoid Hurts, our dear friend of the channel, for is that another $5 Australian? I'm obsessed with the thought that Lil Platoon lays on a banana chair in the backyard in budgie smugglers, sunburnt, drink in hand, live streaming. It's possible. I'm obsessed by trying to picture, his life and backstory. It's an obsession of mine, so I share that with you. M8566, another dear friend of the channel, gifted 5 Echo Chamberlain memberships. Thanks, buddy. That's great. So if you're in the chat and they're still up for grabs, go grab them. And Hemorrhoid Hurts again became a YouTube member. Well, finally, you'll be able to afford that hemorrhoid cream, which should be good as well. So that's nice. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about literature. And Cynic, I'm going to put you on blast for this.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So I'm going to get to the actual thing of cultural consequence and significance in a moment. But before that, I've been exploring women's erotic fiction.
Oh, yeah. I'm a huge advocate for women's erotic fiction. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I want you to do is try and determine, is it the cover of an actual work of women's erotic fiction or one that I made up?
Okay.
Shit.
Okay. Well, your first one is Unhinged, an erotic door romance.
You made this one up.
Sorry, Cynic. This is an actual work of women's
This is
erotic
no
fiction.
fucking way.
Yeah. Like, how do you stretch this out, so to speak, to like 20,000 words? You could
How
do
you
the
stretch
doormat.
this out, she said.
Yeah, like I tried to think it through. Like, you could have a plot point of swinging both ways and being bisexual, or you could have the door being too promiscuous and being a revolving door. Like, eventually, you're going to run out of plot points, right? So anyway,
for 1.
second installment, yeah. Seduced by the Pumpkin Spice Latte by Evelyn Cloves.
You made this one up.
No, this is an actual woman's work
What
of
the
erotic
fuck?
fiction.
I thought that was made up too. Shit.
Look at that cover.
That looks
Well,
fake.
Looks like shit.
No, it doesn't. I'm seduced by the Pumpkin Spice Latte. I'm gonna go read it. It's great.
What the fuck?
Okay, Loving the Centaur by.
All right, you made this one up for sure.
You sure about that?
This is AI. That's AI.
All right, fine. You get one. You're 1 from 3.
Yeah, 1 for 2. All right. I'm like LeBron James right now.
Okay.
My final.
Your next one. Meeting with the Mantis by M.J. Edwards.
I feel like you made up all these. So this is, well, first of all, this is not a good Photoshop job.
Hey.
So I gotta say you made this one up too.
Well, I wish it was so, but no, this is an actual work of women's erotic fiction available on Amazon. Mm-hmm. A whole new species of sexiness. So that looks pretty enticing.
Wait, is this like a self-published book at minimum? Like, it's not actually published through a publisher, right?
Well, they're self-published, but they have vast amount of sales. That was my other criteria. Yeah. These are big hits. Okay, next one. Stuffed, a living pillow romance.
Oh, this is real. Real.
Yes, it is real. Yes.
All right.
Correct. All right, you're getting a bit better. Sprayed, a showerhead romance by Sue Denham.
Oh god. Well, now that you told me they're self-published, even if they're AI covers, that doesn't mean too much. I'm gonna say you made this one up.
All right, yeah, well done. I left in pseudonym.
3-3.
Pseudonym. Yeah. Okay, you're doing good. You're starting to pick up now.
All right.
Claimed by the Cthulhu by Wendy Gog.
That is real.
What makes you so sure?
The art is fucking ridiculous, but it looks professional.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the hell a Cthulhu whatever is, but I'm not sure if you do either. So I'm just gonna say yes, it's real.
It's an elf. The sad thing is I'm thinking of things like I'm trying to think of a way to say that Cthulhu was in her garden. Oh shit!
Okay.
Wait,
and
was that?
come-
Wait, which one was that? Was that real or not?
That was real, yes.
Yes. Okay.
And
Boy,
your last is "Come for Bigfoot" by Virginia Wade.
That's an eldritch horror book.
That's nice. Good job, Greg. Got there in the end.
Come for big. Like, there's no way that. Why are these so hard? That's what she said, I guess. This is real. This is real.
It is in fact real, and it's part one of a 10-part series of multi-selling, hugely selling books. Yeah. There's also a lot of tentacle erotica. And YouTube, funnily enough, would not allow me to read a passage from Tentacle Erotica, even though I was using AI Margaret Thatcher to read it out. Maybe that was the thing that YouTube didn't like. I don't know. Yeah.
Well,
so that's Women's Erotica, which I think is endlessly amusing. There's like 50 more I could have put in there, but those are my choice favorites.
Man.
Another one which was especially good was Loving the Coronavirus, and it's just like a dude, shirtless dude, except he's green. And a woman is in a clinch with him, and it's called Loving the Coronavirus. And the byline was, she was supposed to cure the virus, not fall in love with it. So, yeah, that's quite special. Anywho, today's main discussion point is this. So when you go into a typical bookstore, you this is like what you would generically typically see for vast swaths of a typical bookstore. If you went into a Barnes & Noble, perhaps, you'd see huge plinths full of this kind of stuff. And it's very soft, very pastel, very benign looking. But if you actually delve into this stuff, it's full of the most hardcore erotic content, like graphic stuff you could possibly imagine. You've got 2 Sims, you've got 3 Sims, you've got female harems. Try and get your head around that. You've got all sorts of chaos going on, and it's sometimes brutally sexual. And there's one fairly clear rationale for it, which is 20 or 30 years ago, women would feel extremely self-conscious going to the counter of the Barnes & Noble with, like a Fabio cover of a romance novel, because that would be kind of like a little self-conscious moment. Whereas if you take this stuff up to the counter, it looks benign, it looks soft, so you take out that. It also, wants to be sex positive by making it seem kind of nicer, and it's softer and well-rounded, and it feels more like it's rom-com-y, that kind of thing. Which is all fine, but the issue is, which you might have started to sort of shape in your mind, is that it looks, actually, a lot of it looks disturbingly like YA fiction. The same sort of soft covers, the same sort of very light romance kind of textures and tones and aesthetic. Like if you look at Icebreaker at the front there, like if you saw a 13 or 14-year-old girl had that and she was reading it, you wouldn't think twice, because it just looks like very kind of generic. Maybe it's like a boy and a girl who don't like each other at first, and they go from enemies to being, maybe they go out on a date or something like that, and then there's not much else to it. But no, that's the problem. So I was talking to the 12-year-old daughter with some friends of mine, and she had one of these books like this. And, she's just a little kid. And I went through the book that she was reading, and I was disturbed by the amount of frank and graphic content that's in there, because parents and educators don't understand the little slight that's going on here, that you've got a lot of tween girls drawn to this kind of stuff, which is made worse by the fact that if you go on Amazon or you're buying your books online, oftentimes Amazon or whatever will recommend books based off your preferences, and those recommendations will often come from the covers look similar, or maybe like the authors write as this name and then they also write as this name. So you're having tweens who are buying their YA fiction who are getting recommended this stuff, which they might then also buy as well. And so it's kind of disturbing, because I don't think tweens should be reading this kind of stuff inadvertently, or even because they think that it's sort of like, maybe precociously interesting. That's still kind of squalid and bad. So it's becoming a bit of an issue. So if you saw these books before I gave that big spiel, Cynic, what would you have generally thought of these books if you thought about them at all?
Yeah, they look innocent enough, and definitely almost like kids' books. That's like my initial thought, because of the animated style of almost every single one of them. So but I think we need to bring back the patriarchy, man.
Yeah, it's always a good idea.
Yeah.
Greg, you're the most vigilant patriarch of all, so you must be kind of like, this must set your antenna twitching a little bit. All right, you're muted, Greg.
Sorry, sometimes my keyboard's loud, so I mute myself.
Oh, okay.
My biggest issue with it is that it's hard to find even in the reviews, because people are getting, it's like a super normal, and so you'll even go to look for, like, is this book age appropriate, whatever, like reviews of it, and the reviews will not mention that, chapter 27 is a open door bedroom fuckfest, very explicit, in detail, and then we move on with so like reviews don't even mention it, and that's a huge problem. And you're right, you I was at the bookstore with my daughter a couple of years ago, so she was 15, I think, at the time, or maybe 14, and I haven't read YA in a long time, since Maze Runner and the what was the one with the 5 groups that they all had a different thing, and anyway. So it's been a long time since I've read that stuff. And I asked an employee, I was like, hey, my daughter is looking for like a, YA type thing. What do you got? And she's like, oh, these, just really popular authors, book series called Throne of Glass by this Sarah J. Maas. Very popular stuff. A lot of people are into this. And I'm with a kid, clearly a child. And this employee was like, yeah, check this out. And so she reads it, and the back talks about this girl who's like a trained killer, and she's in a prison, and she has to kill a bunch of people to escape because the king is going to kill her if she doesn't do whatever. But the captain of the guard and the prince both like her, and they're going to help her escape. Like it was very generic kind of action. And to her credit, she got halfway through the book and she was like, I was promised action. Like, I thought this girl was going to be like this ninja assassin, and there has not been any ninja assassinating. It's just been a love triangle that's pretty boring. And some we're bordering on some inappropriate scenes, but that stuff is just like hidden in there. And the other issue is that I've read a few of these, and some of them, the sex scenes will come out of nowhere, and they're not just super graphic, but they are
heartless, callous almost.
Well, they're heartless and callous. Sometimes they're, like somebody mentioned in the chat, they're kind of violent. Like some of the male leads are very like, it's almost abusive. And not to like feel concerned trolly, but it's if you're 15 and you're reading that and all of your fantasy men, it's basically the exact same thing that we saw happen to young men for the last 20 years who grew up thinking that what they were watching was normal. And it's not. But they're thinking that that's what it looks like. Just trying not to teach you in trouble, but you know what I'm talking about. And so, yeah, they're reading this stuff where, this dark, broody shadow daddy, that's what they call them.
That's another thing.
He's like choking and like it, but then he'll also be very emotionally distant afterward. And like that turns around. Like it's some of it's very, if you knew a woman in real life and she was with somebody who was acting that way, you would be like, you need to call the police. You like blink if you need help, make the fucking sign. Like it's borderline abusive. And a lot of times it's hidden, and it really pisses me off that I'll be reading a book like that I really enjoy. I was just reading one actually that's still a good book by T. Kingfisher. It's a pretty famous author. It's The Paladin's Grace. I think it's a whole series. And it's a nice book. It's there's a little romance in there, and sometimes they describe that the two people are feeling some heat between them. They're feeling some heat in their loins or whatever. But then at the end of the book, they straight up fuck, and it's described very detailed. And it's just like, why did we have to do that right at the end of this book? Why did we need that? It was a very nice little cozy fantasy with a little bit of a murder mystery thing, and I was enjoying it. And why did we do that? And why are we sneaking? It feels like you're sneaking in, especially with these covers. Sorry, I'm going off. I gotta quit. But it pisses me off. And it feels like it's all being snuck in to normalize it. And as a dad, that really, really pisses me off.
And you'll have some of the stuff is actually getting into school libraries now as acceptable texts, which is very peculiar, considering that you'll have books that in deep red states cause massive swirls of controversy, and in many instances rightfully so, because the content isn't maybe appropriate for the libraries. But this is slightly more from my perspective, more insidious because of the way that it seems neutral and benign, and then it finds its way into kind of becoming normalized, where the sexual content, it's too brazen and too kind of callous, even by adult standards, rather than setting ideas in impressionable tweens' heads about what actual experience is supposed to be or look like. So I think it's kind of really sad in a way. It kind of brings me down. This is happening, and that there's no kind of self-regulation within the industry about this, because that crossover aspects are getting pretty bad. And so you shouldn't have 12-year-olds reading content which is brazenly sexual, and you're giving them the opportunity to do so with these sort of innocuous-looking books. Because most parents, if they saw that Icebreakers thing, the cover with the soft pastel, the soft rounded contours, the girl boyish kind of thing, you're gonna, and the font, you're gonna think it's utterly innocuous. So just like with
drama.
just like with boys with the internet, and this is kind of like a girl equivalent, where parents who are trying to do their best, this can often slip under the radar. So I think it's becoming an issue. Yeah.
Well, and I've seen some commentary on this, that there's also a troubling trend that's like, it's super normal to I mean, not to compare, because both things are addiction. Like, you're addicted to adult content. When some of these books, like these romance books, these romantasy books, I mean, it's adult. It's, if it were filmed, we'd be like, that's disgusting. Guys are probably into that. But what's odd about this new trend is, again, not to like we're better or compare, but with guys, the stuff that guys watch, they know that they're not supposed to watch it. And like, we don't sit around talking about it. Like, oh, dude, I was watching this video today. The whatever, this was going on. Like, we don't like compare notes and stuff. It's very, it's shameful, because it kind of should be. And you hide it. And you don't like just hang out with your dad. Like, oh, what have you been watching lately? Oh, I've been watching this. But it's weirdly socially acceptable right now for not so much teens, I don't think, but like adult women and their moms and stuff, or their friends, to be like, oh, I've been reading this with it. Oh, he's got tentacles all of a sudden. And like, they're discussing these things like super normal. That's very odd. And I don't know that that's real healthy, that is just casual conversation. That
I was again in another social situation, and there were like one girl was 11, maybe the other was 12, and one was reading a book, and she did just assumed it was like a simple, really innocent kind of boy girl, kind of romancy thing. But then she kept alluding to a page like, oh, I shouldn't read page 186. Oh, it's really bad. And then she would show it to a friend, and they're getting hyped up and super giggly about it. And there's something really kind of squalid and kind of tragic about that, which I find deeply kind of sad.
I find it like extra offensive too, because of the fact that with boys at minimum, like, we were seeking out corn on the internet. You can figure out what I mean by that, I'm sure.
That was sneaky.
But right,
yeah, and so we
but not as sneaky as
we
this.
got through
though.
that by watching Rebel Moon. We managed to get that thing.
Whereas like that type of stuff seems like it's snuck into these kind of books, where someone might pick this up innocently and then fall into that sort of thing. It's not like a boy situation where they're seeking out corn and then fall down a hardcore rabbit hole or something eventually. So it's just it's much darker in this instance for girls. That's really it's awful.
Because there used to be, like, it goes in swings and roundabouts, like, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, like a huge onus on girls to get with a boy in order to feel like a cultural pressure. And then I think that kind of waned, where it became more about discovering yourself and that kind of thing. But this kind of goes the other way, towards being that kind of viciousness, because it's instilling ideas of what actually constitutes a relationship and what's an important part of it. So I don't know, kind of makes me a little glum. Any thoughts, Despot, on this new trend?
It would depend. It would just depend on the book. I mean, I wouldn't lob them all into the same category, and it would depend on the age of the girl. I mean, if a girl is, say, 14, 15, she might be old enough for something that's not too graphic, but is sort of introducing her into the world of sexuality through literature. But you don't want to be too puritanical about it, and being too puritanical about it is counterproductive anyway, because it just turns the books into forbidden fruit, and forbidden fruit is sweet. So I suppose you just have to find a balanced middle ground.
Yeah, Yeah, the shadow daddy trend is another weird one. So it's all about these hunky guys who are 500 or 600 years old, which isn't too much of a new thing because the whole vampire aesthetic has always had
I asked one
that
of my
element in
students
it.
about this. I said that because I said I turned around to one. I'm 30. Well, I was 35 at the time when I asked the student this, and I said, "Okay, so you're 19, and I'm 35. If anyone's interested, she's just my IELTS student, which is International English Language Testing System. And it's a little test you have to pass to go to uni in the UK. And so I said, you're 19, I'm 35. Is that acceptable? And like one of the girls said yes, and two said no. And I said, okay, have you read Twilight? And like, yeah, we've read Twilight. I said, or have you seen the Twilight movie? I said, okay, how old is the vampire? He's 107. They all laughed. And it's like, oh, how is that acceptable? If I can't go out with a 19-year-old, why can a 107-year-old go out with a 17-year-old?
Yeah. So in Twilight, it's kind of played down because he's supposed to be, he comes across more like a moody adolescent, but in these Shadow Daddy stuff, like I haven't read really any of it, but there's the point of it or the gist is that gigantic age disparity is somehow eroticized, which is strange.
If I was that age, if I was like 1,000 years old or something, the last person I'd want to spend my time with on the planet is a teenage girl. They're so fucking boring. If I wanted a mistress, I would want a woman who's, in her 30s, has a bit, I can actually have a conversation with. I think I'm past the point at the age of 1,000 whereby it's all sexual.
Well,
I want a bit of romance,
I think the other thing is that there's like a literary, I'm going to be snooty, but there's like a bad literature side to it where it's just lazy and shitty writing. Like there were introductions to sexual stuff. Like when we were kids, we all read The Giver, or in America, like in sixth grade, I think every sixth grader in the whole damn country read The Giver. Yep. And there is an early scene in that book where the boy wakes up and he's had a dream about a girl classmate, and he describes it to his parents that he was like, I was with this girl, but I was feeling different than I've ever felt. And I wanted to take her shirt off, and I took my shirt off. I'm trying to remember exactly how the scene goes, but I think that's like he takes both their shirts off. I think is how he describes it. And then they give him this pill, and he forgets because it's like this dystopian future thing. You guys have read it. And that is the kind of, like, it's very clearly a sexual scene, and he's wanting to take her shirt off and see her topless and everything. And nowadays the writing is so lazy and terrible that rewritten scene would be like, oh, I had this dream where I pulled out my girthy, veiny cock and I split it into her waiting moist labia and pumped vigorously until we both screamed in orgasmic climax. Like that's how that would be. That's the kind of shit that's in these books. Like, not making it up. It's very graphic and almost like it's just shitty writing. Like it's just so bad.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Hokey doke. Well, Despot, you and I have watched this. I've watched 2 episodes, and you told me to watch all 4, but I couldn't quite get around to it. So you'll have to fill me in with the second part. So it comes from a very honorable and decent place. Stephen Graham there in the foreground, and the screenwriter, prompted by the knife killings combined with the incel culture, to look at UK culture and to try and burrow deep into it. And then the internet happened, of course, which is, they should have more accurately depicted a black boy, an immigrant boy, because that's the source of the problem demographically, that they were too squeamish and shied away from that because they were lily-livered and too woke about it. And so the backlash became really heavy-handed. They started to question the masculinity of the co-screenwriter, all this other stuff. And I get it. Like, you can definitely say that there's a powerful issue right there, and they opted not to go for the fundamental of it, and they went in a slightly different direction. That's fine. That would have been a totally different story, but I'm just not sure, Despot, that you can marry the knife violence as an epidemic problem to the idea of the intricate and malicious and horrible online world of whatever pilling and all of that, because I'm not sure that those black boys or those recent immigrant boys are as much tuned into that element of it, the incel side, as they are other sides. So I think they wanted in this character to more effectively and socioculturally impactfully take the idea of that online insidious world of the incel stuff and the knife violence and just mesh them into one character. So I think technically and structurally, that's what they opted to go for in the end. So you can make criticisms and people will have a lot of flashpoints, which is totally valid. But I think that's what they needed to do in order for this to get up on its feet.
Yeah, fundamentally, you're right in that their intention with the show was to examine the impact of sort of toxic male influencers on young boys. And when I say toxic male influencer, I don't mean that in the sort of Karen sense of the word, whereby any man online who says, you know, you should have a set of balls and stand up for yourself is toxic. You know, if you have to choose between what The Guardian is telling you men should be and what Andrew Tate is telling you what men should be, go with Andrew Tate. Because it's an extreme, but at least you can taper it back to something sane.
Right.
Whereas with The Guardian, you're always going to be a loser and invisible to women. But that's a good idea to examine this culture, but it's so botched. It's so botched because that's a massive problem. It's a massive problem of young men who don't have strong father figures. They don't even have strong male figures in their lives because, like in the UK, 74% of teachers are women. So they don't have any strong male figures in their life. And this causes them to gravitate toward dickheads like Andrew Tate and just similar sort of wankers online who are, you know, basically just grifters. Like at the end of the day, the likes of Andrew Tate's just a grifter. He runs an online pyramid scheme. It was originally called what was it? Hustleversity.
Yeah,
And then
that's right. I forgot about that.
And then he changed the name of it, and it's a pyramid scheme. It's structured like a pyramid scheme. It's just a fucking grift. He's a grifter. Yeah. That's it. That's all he is. And he's a snake oil salesman. But he also has this persona as, you know, an Uber Chad. And the problem is the left loves to focus on the Uber Chad thing when they don't need to, just discredit him as the fucking grifter that he is, and that's it. But the problem is the lack of strong male figures in kids' lives, and so they go online and they get involved with these arsehole figures who are telling them all sorts of nonsense. And apart from anything else, it's all bullshit. Like a lot of the stuff they say about women, like women aren't as bad as they make out. And I could go on about this all day because I actually got into sort of what you would today call red pill online, but I did it like a decade before it was cool, right? And it really helped me. It really helped me because the guys I was listening to weren't like extreme. They weren't crazy. They didn't hate women. It was all just teaching you just to be real. Like, just be real and be honest. That's a great solution for a lot of the problems that men have with women. Be real, be honest, be masculine, and try to better yourself. But this show...
It was I don't want to interrupt you too much, but just while the thoughts on my mind that, you know, I did a video about Jordan Peterson, just saying there was just a moment just for a year where he was right in the middle of the discourse and people were really interested in him and his ideas on masculinity, just for a teetering moment were in the discourse and it worked. And then he just flopped and did his, contract with, what's that right-wing network that tried to make the
Daily Wire. Yeah, he was sort of subsumed about the Daily Wire, which honestly is becoming like the Disney of the right.
But just for a moment with those 12 rules and things, like he was taken seriously in the middle of the discourse as someone to, you know, like he would do appearances, the monk debates with Stephen Fry and people like that. So just for a moment, this was actually, people could talk about it in a way that had masculinity. Like he was taking on the social constructivists, and we need someone to do that again. And there hasn't been someone to fill that breach.
He was the punk band that were awesome and edgy and then sold on to a fucking record contract with Sony.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then they're not cool anymore. They're all fucking mainstream and their songs are poppy bullshit. And they're getting to number 3 in the charts, and it's just sad, man.
Do you agree that there has to be someone to fill that taking on the social constructivist breach?
Well, I mean, it's too dominated by feminist debate. Like there's this is a good show, right? But it's a very broken show because fundamentally it's trying to do two things at once. One, it's trying to examine knife crime and violence against girls, and that is not coming from young white boys in the UK, right? It's also trying to examine the influence of toxic male influencers on kids, right? Yeah. So those are two good ideas, but the show is trying to do them both at once, and it's chosen the wrong. It just doesn't work. It creates this dissonance. So, for example, no young girl has been murdered in the UK as a result of what Andrew fucking Tate said. Okay, and Andrew Tate is mentioned in this show by name, in case you're wondering. One of the police officers said, "Oh, the kids are talking about that Andrew Tate shit." That's her line, something like that. And Andrew Tate is not encouraging. Andrew Tate is not a terrorist ideology. The UK does have a terrorist ideology, militant Islam, which does encourage young men to go out and kill people. But Netflix are never going to make that show. They're never going to have that conversation, right? They're never going to make a show which asks why Axel Rudy Cabana went out and butchered 3 little girls at a Taylor Swift dance party. They're too cowardly for that, and we all know that. So they don't want to have that conversation. They also don't want to talk about drill rap. Drill rap is a subculture in London, and in which like rappers will murder each other, and then they'll make rap songs about it. And it's this hyper masculinized culture in which if you aren't some sort of insane murderer, you're considered a pussy. That's obviously an extremely vicious culture which you could examine and make an interesting show about, but no, they don't want to do that because they don't want to be accused of racism. So they can't make that show. But they can have this little white kid because he is the ideologically acceptable face of evil, and it's not convincing. It's bullshit, and we all know it. The toxic male influence thing was an interesting idea, but if you wanted to do that, this would have been a much better show, I think, if this kid, he's called Jamie in the show, if Jamie becomes very frustrated because he's listening to all this alpha male bullshit, and he's like, I want to be an alpha male, and the girls sort of laugh at him. And then he like picks up a brick and he throws it in straight into a girl's face, right? And he doesn't kill her, but it's a serious assault, and he's arrested and things like that. And then there's fallout from that. That would have been interesting, but by suggesting that this kid just out of the blue just knifes a girl,
it was too dissonant
because he's listening to Andrew Tate. It's nonsense. It's utter nonsense. So
that they could have done it if they'd done an escalation where, in a retaliatory sense, he drove her by becoming monstrous through being poisoned by all this online stuff and loses his humanity and empathy, drives her to take her own life, and then trying to figure and unravel how that happened would have been a better plot thing.
That could have
worked. You're right. It was just too incongruous when they show you
the way they did
footage.
It was too ham-fisted. Like the actual inciting incident is his murder of the guard. Way too ham-fisted. Not good writing. Just bad writing. Very poor delivery. And then there's other facts. Sorry, go ahead, Echo.
Oh, just in terms of the technical craft and delivery of the first episode, it's one of the best first episodes I've seen of a show in a long time. The first episode of Adolescence was visceral, and the one-take decision with intricate blocking was inspired, maintaining the dread amid bleak, stolid procedurality. And young Owen Cooper was tremendous. To do that in one fucking take, man, was unbelievable.
The first episode of this
is that way.
The first episode of this is excellent. It's brilliant TV, and there's none of that. They don't get into the motives behind it. Like, so there's none of that, he did it because Andrew Tate has harems. There's none of that shit. That only comes in episode 2. And episode 2 is also really good.
Yeah, slightly more patchy.
I actually think it's brilliant. It's a bit more patchy, and you start to get some of that sort of propaganda elements, but it's really good for this reason.
Yeah.
And I want to speak on this. So I know I've been speaking for a while, but this is important to me because I've been a teacher for since I was 22. So it's like I'm in my 14th year now. And every time I see a show or a movie where a student is killed and then they go to the school, all the kids are crying and they're sad and the mood is really down and they've got little memorials up and all the kids have their heads held like this. And it's bollocks. It's bollocks. Kids that age, teenagers that age, sort of age like 11 to 14, 15, they're the worst people on the planet. They don't have sufficient empathy.
That's true.
They're just horrible, horrible people.
No lies told.
It took me a while I thought that they were mucking it up by trying to do that too much, but as the episode went on, I went, this is exactly how it would unfold.
Because in episode 2, it's the day after the girl is murdered and word has gotten all around the school that she's dead, and the kids don't give a fuck. They're laughing, they're making TikToks. They're just having a good time. They're making fun of each other. They're making silly little comments at each other. One kid is upset, her friend, and the rest don't give a fuck. And that is a brilliant depiction of what children are actually like and how they would actually react to this, because that age demographic is so brutally unempathetic. But also,
they seem struck by the the overall feeling of unfocused energy, being hyped up, but not quite knowing how to do it, or how
Yeah,
not having the
and
empathy or the skills to cope with it, probably was really
yeah,
interesting. I thought.
there's that element of it as well. It's like the teachers are struggling to contain the kids, and then in episode 3 they send this Karen psychologist in to interview Jamie, and she's struggling to control him. And it's almost like a representation of how the UK tries to oppress the natural masculinity of boys and struggles to do that. Now, I don't know if that was deliberate on the part of the writer, but it certainly comes out in the show. It's this country that is, and this culture that is trying to suffocate the masculinity of young boys. And it's causing the young boys to act up. They don't know how to deal with young boys. They're kind of treating them like defective girls. And that is the UK. The UK is a feminist country. It's a country run by feminists. One of the reasons it's so broken. And it's creating these kids that feel like they're oppressed, or feel like this is wrong. I hate this, you know. I really get that from the show. I don't know if it's deliberate on the part of the writer, but if it is, it's brilliantly written in that sense. And then episode 4 is really good as well, because that's the sort of impact on the family and on the father. It could have been a brilliant show, but it got greedy and decided to go with the whole, Jamie kills this girl because Andrew Tate told him that he should have a harem with 8 women and buy a mansion in Dubai. It's complete. That aspect of it just ruins the show.
See, I'll be honest, I didn't get that from it. I thought that the whole show was about the failure of these fathers to be a proper role model, because both of the two guys in the show, the father, and then the cop, I don't remember what his name was, but he also doesn't have much a relationship with his own son. I think that was episode 2. And his own son has to like grab him and like, hey, you're embarrassing that you don't know what these emojis mean, and has to explain the whole like emoji. This is what this secret language is. And he's like, you are totally off track. And they're very uncomfortable with each other. And then he has the conversation with his partner about like, hey, he didn't want to be a dad and he's trying to do, whatever, but he's also not doing a great job as a father. And I think that was the point, was that he's investigating this kid for killing this girl, and, investigating these influences and what led this kid and whatever. And his own son, he barely can have a conversation that lasts more than 30 seconds. He's interrupting the boy constantly. He's not listening. They're talking past each other. I didn't get the sense that the show was about the evils of Andrew Tate. I got the sense that when these boys have no one that in the system that cares about them, because the public school system is very feminized. I'll agree with you on that. It treats all the children, I don't want to say like girls, but the nature of public school demands a certain type of behavior that girls are better at than boys. And so it just favors them. And I don't think it's on purpose, but it just favors them. And boys struggle with public school. And then you clearly see, as you said, the 4th episode, I mean, you have this whole conversation with the parents, like, where did we go wrong? And they just sort of let him go to his room, and they put this computer in his room that he's on all night long, and they don't really question what he's doing or who he's hanging out with. And he's out all night with his friends. I don't even know where he's at. The father talks about how, he worked all these hours. So I didn't think that the show was about look at how these what these male influencers are doing to these kids. I got from the show, look at what happens when you don't have a father that's part of a boy's life. What's he going to do? He's going to watch fucking Andrew Tate, and he's going to think that that's all real. And then when he gets rejected, he's going to imagine, yep, everything they said was true. The world's out to get me. This fucking bitch just rejected me because she's one of them. She's one of those fucking 80-20 whores that doesn't love me because I don't have a Lamborghini. And then because he's 13 and has zero fucking impulse control, stabs her to death. Which I agree with you. I think that was a little like, I was a teenage boy and I had no impulse control myself. I never thought about stabbing anyone.
I agree with you.
Even not thought about it. Like I never got like super violent or whatever. So I thought that was a little much.
That was my initial interpretation of it was actually the same as yours, Greg. I thought because the sort of incel nonsense, it's a very small part of the show. It's only mentioned a few times.
Yeah.
So I thought, no, that can't really be what they're going for here. There's a lot more going on. I do think there's other elements of that, but I couldn't make up my mind. So I looked it up. And this is what convinced me that no, this really is an attempt to examine the effect of male influencers on kids. And I'll just read you the quote. So this is from the Wikipedia page of Adolescence TV show. So speaking on BBC Radio 4's arts program Front Row, Thorne stated that the two writers wanted to, quote, look in the eye of modern male rage and examine the influence of public figures such as Andrew Tate on boys. So that is from the writers. They've said themselves that the purpose of this show was to examine male rage and basically Andrew Tate. and which is that's what they said. So I'm just taking them at their word in my interpretation of the show. It's not like the left wing has jumped on this and forced their own interpretation onto it because it's a valuable tool in the propaganda war. No, that is at its core, this show is about male rage and the influence of male influencers on boys.
I went a slightly different direction to you guys with how they posited those two fathers. I thought those two fathers are fundamentally really good men. I mean, I think they've drifted from being overly attentive, which just seems to me like a natural consequence or phase when their adolescents are in that phase of life and they're busy as well. But I think they seem fundamentally strong pillars of masculinity to me, irrespective of that. I think there's a cautionary note in the fact that fathers have to be more vigilant, perhaps, than they would have in previous generations because of the more insidious threats directly under their own nose from the internet and everything else. But that's not an undermining of them principally. I mean, this comp just strikes me as a fundamentally decent guy who's drifted a bit from his son in a vaguely sort of understandable, if not sympathetic way. It was an interesting dynamic where he's trying to talk to his son.
Go ahead.
And he's messing that up by still being in his policeman's procedural interrogative mindset and frame of mind. And it was really good characterization to see the son kind of blistering, not liking that. Like he had the sense of that he's doesn't like that voice being brought home and then being talked to, that he kind of, but that's just like a minor interesting form of characterization. That's not a fundamental flaw of the character. Both of those seemed like really good, decent men to me. So I mean, in a slightly different direction.
Just for the benefit of the viewers, I will say, all politics aside, take whatever interpretation you want from the show. I do recommend it. I think it's a very well written show.
Oh, yeah.
It has some brilliant stuff in it. The acting is excellent. The cinematography is very nice. It's a good show. But I will say this though, and I want to talk about this. I don't want to spar out on it. I'd rather just listen to your opinions because I think a lot about this stuff. The reaction to this show in the UK has been so strong. I think it speaks to the sheer frustration that British people have with their own culture and its inability to address its own problems. Because here you have a show which is not... Britain has so many problems. It's such a broken country right now. And I think people would like to have a public conversation about, Islamic extremism or blackmail violence or, drill rap culture. There are so many conversations that people want to have about broken Britain, and this isn't one of them. Young white boys attacking girls because of Andrew Tate isn't one of those conversations. And I think there was just this explosion of people who are angry, like, why can't we talk about something fucking real for a change? Why do we have to persist with this anti-white bollocks? And it was just this rage from one side, and then this pat on the head from the sort of Guardianista, the Guardian reading liberals on the other, who were delighted that they felt that this show was a complete vindication of their worldview. And it caused this culture war to erupt in the country, which I don't think the writers intended. I don't think the writers are that politically inclined. They don't strike me as zealots, but it just shows what an unhealthy place the UK is in culturally, the reaction to this show.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the, I'm not up on British culture, but the dad, from what I understand of British culture, the dad kind of embodies the stiff upper lip, just suck it up and roll with it. And I think it was exploring how that is not healthy because it walls off the kid and then they have this distance, and that's what he regrets in the end. But you mentioned how the system and a lot of it treats boys like broken girls. And I thought the third episode was marvelous for that.
Yeah,
because
that was brilliant.
He kept referencing the other therapist, and it was very, very subtle. And I'll tell you what, I'm surprised this is on Netflix because Netflix makes a lot of slop, and this is not a second screen show. This is like, if you turn it on, you're going to be glued to it. Like, and you have to be watching it. Every scene is used in some way. It's excellent television. And that episode was really interesting. And I'm with you. I don't know how much was on purpose, like how much they got right on purpose, but it was incredible that he kept saying the other therapist, the guy, just asked me straightforward questions and I gave him straightforward answers. And I liked that guy. Like, I knew what he was doing. And the entire time he thinks that this woman is trying to trap him and trick him. And he doesn't know where she's going. And she wants to keep talking and he's tired of talking. And it was really incredible writing that summed up how those two approach the problem. The woman just wants to ask different questions, and I'm going to come at it from different angles, and I want to, you know, kind of come at it the roundabout way, or I want to just try to get more information that may be useful, may not. I'll decide later. And he's like, what the fuck is your game? And I'm going to be straightforward. And the other therapist was straightforward. And I feel like I'm being tricked because you're asking me too many questions. And that it captured that male-female dynamic and how the female therapists handle it, how the male therapists handle it, and why young boys are having such a hard time, especially in therapy. Men hate therapy classically, but that's part of why, because they feel like they're being trapped because the questions don't seem to make sense and they feel like a trick. And it was spot on. It was incredible.
Has anyone here ever seen the Virgin Suicides?
Yeah, I did.
Right, so have you seen it, Cynic?
No, I have not.
It's very depressing. I tried to rewatch it recently and I just couldn't. Maybe, Greg, this would be an interesting question for you. There's certain stuff that after I became a father, I just couldn't watch anymore. Anything that involves violence against kids deaths, I can't watch it anymore. It's too upsetting, but I used to be able to watch it before I was a father. Interesting. Yep. But anyway, moving on. So there's a scene where a girl tries to kill herself and a priest is talking to her. And he says, you know, love, why would you do this? You don't even know how bad life is going to get. And she said, obviously, Father, you've never been a 13-year-old girl. And it's a great line because the movie is making the point that no man can ever understand what it is like for a young girl going through adolescence, right? The early adolescence. You simply cannot connect with that on an emotional level. And I kind of got that from episode 3, that she had this feminist Karen trying to make sense of this boy and to fit him into her worldview. You know, how does this make sense within my sort of guardian world outlook? And it's so frustrating for him. And he doesn't have the words to say it, but if he did, he would probably say something like, look, Karen, you can never understand how I feel because you have never been a 13-year-old boy. You know, and it captured that really well.
Yeah, it was amazing. And the one, God, I just kept being so impressed by the one-shot thing that they did that and they acted so well. And I mean, like, you can't slip up, and you have to deliver it with the emotion. That kid's a good actor too. Like, fuck, like kid actors usually suck. I was blown away by the technicals of the show. Even if the themes, like, you can't get on board with every single theme, but damn, the production of this was incredible.
And by the way, Stephen Graham was fucking
I love that guy. He's a great actor. I almost found like I was bracing and almost preparing to flinch because I was agonized that just like 1 second of a peep of someone looking at the camera. So it was on edge, even though I knew it wouldn't have worked. But fuck, the discipline to get everyone to just do that with the camera roaming slowly around. It's just instinctive that you're going to see something in your peripheral vision. Amazing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, even the woman who played the woman who played the Karen psychologist as well, she was excellent. She captured that perfectly.
Yeah. Well, and the subtle like threat that he gave to her, and she was trying to seem like she wasn't scared, but she gave off the impression that she was, and then like she had the breakdown afterward. Like, and nobody was overacting the crying or the you know, their shot nerves or whatever. And God, it was incredible. Like at the end of the second episode, I want to know. I would love some behind the scenes footage of they have the cop and his son, and they finally get in the car. Like, hey, let's go get some chips or whatever. And then the emotional girl that never comes up again. It's like she was a very weak character from the story because she was just there for a second and then they never came back to it. But they show her and then the camera flies up and across town and then comes down again to the father. And I'm interested in like, what was the camera work like? Did they, I mean, did they have a drone attached to it? And they
drone shots are popular now. Drone shots are good because they can give the audience a good sense of where this is taking place, like the socioeconomic conditions. Is it a squalid slum or is it a middle-class suburb? That's why they love drone shots so much. It's really nice for establishing sort of social milieu setting.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've got the next 2 episodes to look forward to.
It's phenomenal.
Any way you slice or dice it, if they tried to do this from any perspective, any race, ethnicity of the character, you'd get some sort of division.
Yeah,
you'd get some sort of static.
If it was a black kid, my God, it would just be, you'd have people screaming racism from the rooftops, you know?
So they did the best they could. They came from a really good place. Technically, it was brilliant. The performances of the kids, fantastic. Stephen Graham, awesome. So it might have some stick out edges or whatever, but come on. Like, let's just be grateful for fantastic show.
Really good television.
Well, speaking of fantastic shows, it pretty much brings us to the end of ours. Probably our grittiest discussion that I've had, but all the better for it, I think. So all that remains is to do a quick whip around. And Cynic, are you going to go on Open Bar and discuss Snow White next, or George the Giant Slayer and discuss Snow White next?
I don't know. I was on Open Bar like a week or two ago, so probably not in the rotation for up next. But I'm probably just going on sabbatical here and just chilling until Minecraft comes out, and I'll review that. And it's gonna kick back and not do too much. Do
you think that's going to get any views? Do you think our audiences are going to be really interested in Minecraft reviews?
I don't know, but that's just it's the next thing coming out that looks awful, so I'll probably just be all over it. You know,
is this going to be a trash? Cynic, so. Will this be a trash or an oof or a lol? Do you think in the thumbnail?
Oh, maybe a lol. Maybe a lol. Those are my three I like to rotate between. So yeah.
Brilliant. All right. Well, Despot, what can you tell the folks?
Oh, I'm currently working on a top secret long project, which it's a bit of a risk for me. I don't know how well people will respond, but I'll keep tight-lipped for it for now.
Okay, brilliant. And Greg Owen, what can you tell the folks?
I've got 2 videos coming out this week. I'm working my arse off. Tomorrow is an exploration of where woke came from in Hollywood, from Marx to postmodern to the 90s intersectional to the modern wokeness. And then Friday is Last of Us 2. I finally fucking played that shit, and I'm gonna speculate on how the show is gonna go. Spoilers, it's not gonna go well. So that's this week.
Okay, great. Well, on behalf of the panel, I just want to thank the chat for being a wonderful chat. It's good to see all the familiar faces and names in there. And that pretty much does it for today. So yeah, just remains to say haere kakiti anō, and we'll catch you all on the next stream. So goodbye, everybody.